Well, sorry. Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Sorry. A couple little technical hiccups here. Hello and welcome, Fariya. I have Fariya Doc with me here today. She is a Feldenkrais practitioner. I consider her something like a body mechanic from when I first saw you many years ago. I know you consider yourself a movement detective, and I'm so happy to dive into this conversation. I think, Fariya, you have so much knowledge and information to share, not only with this group, but with humankind. Anybody that's breathing, I think, can benefit from Feldenkrais. So let's start. First of all, thank you for your time and being here and your gracious offer to spend time with us here today. So if you are tuning in live, just drop a hashtag live into the chat. And if you're catching this on replay, certainly hashtag replay. But Fariya, welcome. And I'm hoping maybe we can start by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I can do that, Sharlene. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I just wanted to say Happy International Women's Day to you and the women who are listening in. It's kind of auspicious getting an interview on International Women's Day. How awesome is that?
How more fitting could it be? Yes, from a powerful woman. Yes, being here today. So thank you.
Well,
thanks for that.
Thank you. Well, I started off as a massage therapist in the Niagara region, and then did a 4-year training with the Feldenkrais method of movement education. So I kind of segued my career as a massage therapist in Niagara. I think I came to the Niagara region in about 1990 or so. No, what am I talking about? 97 or something like that. And then after a number of years, I became a Feldenkrais practitioner, partly because, I had some physical issues and I couldn't seem to resolve them. So after having a baby, I was having a lot of problems with my back. My back would go out. I'd get back pain. I had one terrible episode where I passed out with back pain. And I wasn't able to figure out what was going on with me. And as I trained in the Feldenkrais method, I started figuring out that I had these habits that I did every day, that contributed to my back pain. And so I learned how to work on my how I was standing, change how I walked and how I jog. I would go for a jog or I'd go for a workout and then I'd feel like a mess, the next day, and I would need to rest for the rest of the week, which was awful. I was all going backwards. And so I learned how to pay attention to my body in a certain way, or how to repair some of my habits before I went out and did something strenuous. So that's what got me hooked. The Feldenkrais method got me hooked because I became pain-free. And I've been pain-free since. I did my training 2000 to 2004, graduated in 2004. And I've been, I would say, not pain-free, but injury-free. I haven't injured myself. No.
Yeah.
So, and I've been challenging my body even more by doing, heavier weights and things like that, and weightlifting, and I'm able to sort of prime my body and organize myself in a way to prevent injury. So I don't know if does that give you an idea of what I do? Did I answer your question?
I think it does. I think having known you and you helped me many years ago, I can see how, the understanding of the body mechanics through anatomy with what you were doing with massage therapy, how that led you into this somatic type of practice. And I think it might be worth sharing, if you don't mind, for those that are not familiar with Feldenkrais, like what is it on a high level? Maybe that's worth explaining to people. It's interesting. I know it's named after the guy that that founded this very interesting technique and philosophy. But yeah, I think if people haven't heard of this, or like, what, the name itself doesn't describe what it does. So yeah, maybe if you wouldn't mind doing that.
It does, and it is a difficult thing to describe, but what I tend to, how I tend to describe it is I look at when someone walks in the door, I'm looking at how they're moving. I do a full intake. I look at their body mechanics. First, they tell me what's going on. I look at what they're doing when they're sitting, when they're standing, when they're walking, when they're talking to me. And then they lay down on a wide, firm table, and I start working with their movements. What I'm listening for, and I use the word listening, but I'm listening through my hands, I guess, is I'm looking for what their muscles are doing, how they're reacting to what the movements that I'm doing. So when I listen for their movement patterns, I'm able to decipher what some of their sequence habits are. So, when someone, let's say, comes in with knee pain, and so I'm looking at what is happening in that joint, and how is the support system working through the ankle, through the knee, through the hip joint, through the spine. So it's not an isolated problem, right? You're a whole body, you're a whole system. And when we isolate, when we do too much isolating, and traditional care tends to hone in on a problem and then try to stabilize that problem. But it could be that something's going on in their shoulders that's tipping them in a funny way, that's impacting the use of that particular joint. So I'm looking at how the whole sequence, the domino effect, right from the heel right up to the head. And sometimes it's is that the person has their head forward so much through so much of the day that it's challenging their whole back and muscular system. So I kind of look at the whole body, how the whole body is moving through space, and feel for where it's not traveling through properly. And then I gently, gently work with, and it is a very gentle approach. I'm taking a person, you know, how in osteopathy they say that you go into a restriction to come out of the restriction. You go into a tightness to come out of it. And I do something similar in the sense that I show the person what the sequence or the pattern of movement they're doing, and then I offer another option. You could do this, and that might cause you pain. Or you could do this, and that would make the movement through that joint effortless. And so often people get misaligned for a variety of reasons. They might have injured themselves as a child, broke a joint, twisted their ankle as a child, and then the sequence problem happens in the knee or in the hip. It could be just going through pregnancy, you know, and that big change in the body throws the whole body off and the balance system off. So then they need that to help to reorganize how they're using their core, for example, or how they're organizing their shoulders or their chest. It could be a sports injury, or something that's related to their family history. And a lot of people think, well, it's in my family, so I'm kind of stuck with it for the rest of my life. Well, that's not true. It's absolutely not true. With the Feldenkrais method, you're looking at how adaptable your brain is to a challenge. And we all have, we're all walking around with brains.
Hopefully.
And so, yeah, hopefully. And so by tapping into that flexibility in the brain, the ability for the brain to learn and change and adapt, we can work through those problems very successfully.
And I think, having used your expertise and been part of your classes in the past. One of the things that I think is just key on its own without even the rewiring is, first of all, the awareness, because you're connecting the body mechanics. And I in my mind, that's who you are to me. You're the body mechanic, like you you assess how things are working and where and why and how. But really just bringing the mind patterning and perhaps unconscious movement and repetitive habits to the forefront of your mind, and connecting it with the patterning of the body. And what's typically, probably ingrained in us, particularly at this age, for many years, and for, as you said, probably a variety of reasons of why we become entrenched into our habituated patterns. And I know that too from being a yoga instructor, that, we all carry around imbalances and we can't see our own blind spots. So oftentimes it takes someone from the outside to just like have you look at yourself from a different perspective, because if you have this imbalance, you think this is normal. That's just for an illustration. But yeah, it's really, I don't know, in my opinion, very effective of what you're doing. I remember when you and I first worked together, it actually hurt my brain for a little bit, because yeah, I mean, because we do things so much on autopilot that you don't even think about it. Like, I know we're gonna hopefully talk about breathing today, but one of the problems that I had when I came to see you, it led to how I walked. And so I was very conscious every time that I was walking, and I was like, geez, this is something that I do all the time, every day throughout your entire life. But then when you actually put your mind to it and the awareness to it, wow, it did hurt my brain for a while to actually, like, try to self-correct. Do you like, would you, how would you say that the mind ties into the Feldenkrais practice? Is it, are you teaching your clients to like be conscious of their movement typically?
Yes. At first, it's very sensory. So I might say, well, here you twist this way really easily. Can you feel that? And then a person was like, oh yeah, that is easier than this way. So I turn to the right easier than I turn to the left. I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know. So then it's like, well, how does that tie into the injury? So we kind of unravel what you're good at and look at how could you improve the other things, right?
Mhm.
So so the mind, so it's interesting. That's an interesting question, because we bring what's unconscious conscious, but also there's the emotional component to that, right? So
Mhm.
it can be emotionally challenging sometimes to shift that pattern, especially if that pattern is related to stress,
Mm.
right? And so that's where you kind of go, okay, you gently take a person and gently give them options. You don't push them in a direction that they don't understand and that they don't want to go in. Because then what ends up happening is they reject the change.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of take a person carefully along that path to, here's where you are, and you could be here, but I'm not going to take you all the way there. I'm going to take you here. And how does that feel? Is that okay with you? And so that's the challenge, and that's the practice of helping a person shift at the speed they're comfortable shifting in. And in the end result is that they're more comfortable in their body. They have a sense of safety, a reliance, that they understand I often have people say, I feel disconnected. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, why I'm feeling off. It's like they're lost in the forest. And
Mm.
so when you're lost like that, yes, it's really helpful to go to a professional to get some help, and whatever that may be, to get help and go, okay, look at these trees in the forest, and look at the organization and arrangement of them. So it's kind of like that for the body, of understanding where you are in space, sensing your sense of balance and your mobility and your preferences. We
Mhm.
all have preferences. It's normal. It's human to have preferences. I write with my right hand. I don't write with my left hand, right? So we all have these little imbalances. The problem is that when the imbalances start getting bigger, then the body starts complaining. And that's usually when I see someone. And sometimes they'll come in and they'll say, this came out of the blue. I don't know what's going on. I've never had a problem here. And now I do. There must be something wrong with my joint. And it's not that. It's that the habits have been repeated over a period of time. And now you've hit a place where the body is starting to say, I don't like this anymore, change it.
Mhm.
And that's when I usually will see someone. And I do, at the beginning is sometimes baffling, right? The first session is like, wow, what just happened? I feel different. And then over time, the person understands what changed and it becomes more and more embodied. And that's when the change becomes permanent, is
Mhm.
when it becomes embodied and understood. And then I always give people home care, like these movements are really useful for you to do because it helps balance your rotation. Let's say now you can turn both directions easily without force.
Mhm.
So fluid sequential movement. Yeah.
And I think for you that leads into perhaps the next question of like, what are the most common issues that you see when as people come to you for help?
Usually it's a place that keeps showing up, back pain or hip pain or shoulder pain. They get treated for it, comes back. They get treated for it, comes back. There's something that is elusive. So it it's it's usually discomfort that brings someone to me, and a kind of discomfort that's starting to worry them, that's starting to impinge on their lifestyle, the quality of their life, and they're annoyed with it, or they're a little frightened. What's happening? Am I going downhill? And so that's usually what is the triggering factor to have people come through the door and try to sort things out. And a lot of people will say to me, I had no idea. I didn't know about this. And it's like, now I understand why I ended up in this situation. And that's really empowering, right? That if
Mm.
you understand what's going on, then you're empowered and you have an option to change it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. That's normally our motivating factor is pain, to get out of pain. So it seems like loud and clear, people that are in any kind of discomfort or pain are seeking out solutions, and coming to find you, which is wonderful. And I know that you can help them. It's just unfortunate that we don't do this as a preventative measure. I do know that you offer classes, and maybe that's something we can talk about in the future for some somatic type of movements and awareness, which I've been a participant in a number of those. Um, and yeah, maybe later you can tell us what you're doing, and if there is any kind of preventative things that anyone here would be interested in being part of. But I am really excited to talk to you. I know when we were lining this up, and I asked you, what you thought you might want to talk about or bring to this group that could be of benefit. And you mentioned this thing that about breathing that I think can help absolutely anybody. And I'm so curious to know more about this. So um, you've become like emphatic about the breath, from what I understand.
Mhm.
So tell us what you've learned or what's so fascinating or what we need to know.
There's so many interesting key things about breathing that we need to readjust our perspective on. And over the years and within our culture, we've learned that bigger is better, more is better, And it turns out for day-to-day, activities, it's actually quite the opposite. We've also learned in our culture that carbon dioxide is bad and you need to push as much of it out as possible. Well, now the science is showing that actually we really need carbon dioxide in our bloodstream. We need it so that our blood vessels can open up and that we can get better oxygen supply to our vital organs, our brain, our heart. And so the science has been out for a while, but because it's so counter to social perspectives, it doesn't get embraced. So what's happened now, there's been a movement, there's been a big shift in our perspective on breathing. And I'm sure, Sharlene, you've come across this in classes and yoga classes and Pilates classes. More and more yoga teachers are starting to adopt this philosophy that number one, only breathe through your nose. Number two, slow the breathing down and don't work so hard to breathe. Make it lighter, make it easier, and make it more efficient so that you have better oxygen supply through your body. So those are the big takeaways that I help people. I teach people how to adopt, and I've since been certified in the Buteyko method of breathing. It's Buteyko. If you want to search that out, there's a lot of information online. There's also Patrick McEwen, who's big in the Buteyko method. He's the one that has popularized this idea of efficient breathing for performance, for sports, for life, and to improve your overall health. There's a book out by James Nestor called Breath, The Art and Science of a Lost, the art, was it of, I can't remember the actual tagline, but it's an amazing book. You have to read it. It's pivotal. This is a book that's shifting people's perspective and understanding the importance of nose breathing in jaw development in children. So more dentists, I'm hoping. I don't know if anyone in this region has studied it, but I'm hoping more dentists understand that aspect. And so it's pivotal. This shift in understanding of breath is changing. It's changing people's mental health as well as physical health. And it's interesting that women are a bit different than men. Big surprise, right?
Right.
And the research now, they're starting to spend a little bit more time researching why women's breathing patterns are different than men's. And it's influenced by estrogen.
Interesting.
And so in our cycle, our carbon dioxide tolerance drops. And so there are ways of correcting our breathing pattern so the PMS symptoms are less. Isn't that amazing?
Totally amazing.
It's so ubiquitous. The breath is there all the time. We do it so many times during the day. It's that one thing. You change that one thing and it influences the whole body. Mm-hmm. It influences how well you get oxygen into your lungs. It influences how well your diaphragm moves without effort. Now, I'm talking about without effort. If we're exercising, it's a bit different. Mm-hmm. There are more muscles involved when you're breathing, when you're exercising. But this whole concept of breathing through the nose is really a big deal. I have Mr. Nose right here.
Mr. Nose.
Mr. Nose or Mrs. Nose. And this space here in your skull, that's your sinuses, that's your nose. And this is the real estate in your face for your sinuses. It's a big deal.
A lot.
It's there to protect us, protect our lungs. It's there to protect our overall health, stop viruses from getting into our lungs. And it also warms the air. It traps nitric oxide. Are you familiar with nitric oxide and how that influences the body?
We should talk about that. Let's do it. Go there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what so there are lots of things on the market now in health food stores about nitric oxide and how nitric oxide helps with circulation and overall health. And yes, it does. And we pick up nitrogen from the air. And so when we pick up nitrogen from the air, if we breathe through our nose, we trap the nitrogen. And what it turns into nitric oxide. And what that does is it helps relax our lungs. It opens up the bronchi, the tubes in our lungs, and it improves um, airflow into our lungs. It also helps with um, relaxing the blood vessel walls of the arteries. And there are also some other factors around mood. So it's kind of a feel good molecule. It makes you feel happier, it makes you feel better. Um, and it just improves overall function. So apparently there are more functions of the nose that I don't know about, like details,
Mhm.
um, biochemical details that I don't know about. But the sinus area is a critical factor for improving your overall breathing pattern in your health. So I teach people how to switch to a nose breath if they tend to be more inclined to breathe through their mouth.
Mhm.
If they're doing a lot of speaking, I teach them how to regulate their breath so that they breathe in through their nose when they're speaking. Um, and I help some people who have cardiovascular issues, heart issues, um, even lung damage. You can really improve the function of the lung just by switching to a nose breath, and particularly through the night. So it affects blood oxygen. It'll affect how well you sleep. It's a big, big factor in how deeply you sleep through the night. So there are a lot of women out there who have really affected sleep, especially after having children. And just simply uh, putting a little bit of tape on their mouth during the night will force them to switch to a nose breath,
Mm.
and it'll keep their sleep more restful and deeper.
Absolutely.
So it's big.
Yeah, and this is the the breathing through the nose has been kind of ingrained from my perspective through yoga,
Mm,
but more so now. Um, I keep hearing all about the benefits of nose breath. And it was just a little while ago, a few weeks ago, a friend of mine, she's a dear friend, she's also a natural healthcare practitioner. She called me up and she was so excited. And she she was taking part of a workshop and she said, "Do you know?" And I didn't know. "Do you know that us breathing as humans through our nose has changed the shape of our jaw over time?" So that it's been an evolutionary transition, but we now as a population in mass quantities are getting away from this this thing that has revolutionized and evolutionalized us as humans about breathing through the nose. So I think this is a topic I think that's really worth exploring. I mean, it's something that is so simple in the sense
mhm.
that, I mean, if you're alive, you need to be breathing. So it's happening throughout your entire life. And it's fascinating to me because it's the only thing that I know of that happens involuntarily. Like it just, you don't have to think about it, but it's the one thing that you can control and change. So it too affects your physiological state, your overall well-being. Um, and when you were talking about nitric oxide, the one thing that I do know is that it has a direct correlation. I don't know if we lost you, Fariya, if you're frozen, maybe.
There
Oh,
we
there
go.
you are. Wow, that was fast.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yes, It is. It's a really, and if we're not motivated to help ourselves with it, we might be motivated to help our children with it, especially children who have asthma, who have allergies, and they have a lot of struggle with nose breathing. You want to start soon because their jaw structure will change, their palate will, go up and narrow, and it'll crowd their mouth. Their teeth will have difficulty coming in. There's all kinds of things and it'll affect their brain functioning as well, because mouth breathing at night, you're getting about 50% less oxygen. So you're waking up tired,
Mhm.
and it affects, it affects performance and brain performance.
Yeah, and I didn't realize the nitric oxide like to having such a prevalence in the nasal capacity. I know of not nitric oxide for precursors and their direct link to dopamine and serotonin, the feel good hormones. So it's interesting to me. This is all kind of coming to culmination, particularly through breath. So maybe maybe that's something we can explore in the future, of maybe doing some kind of a breath workshop or class or something like that.
Absolutely, we can do that. Yeah,
Um,
there's so many little simple things that we can do online to teach.
yeah.
I do a lot of online teaching. As have a class, I've got a series of classes starting next week on stability and balance, and I usually have some kind of workshop or class around breathing. Right now, I don't have anything slated, but we could definitely do something on Facebook Live.
Yeah, and this may be a good time to let people know where they can find you. I'll try to link up as much as I can here below, and maybe the references that you mentioned of those books. But if someone is looking for some help, wants to find you or explore more about Feldenkrais, where do they find you?
Well, my website's the best place to go, and you can just type in my name and you'll find me. Um, my website is fariyadoctor.com. And even if you were to put in Feldenkrais in Niagara, I would come up. I'm the only person in this region, and my name is a little unusual, so it's pretty easy to find me on the internet. And on my website, I have sort of a section for, what is it that you're looking for? Are you looking to help yourself with your mobility issues, pain, or are you looking for some breath coaching sessions? And I have both services. I can do them on site or online. And so people who are living further away sometimes prefer the online option.
Mhm.
And I also have some free lessons on my website. So if you go to the resources section, you'll see um, the the free lessons that are available. And I have a breathing lesson on there. So if
Oh,
you
good.
want to take advantage of that audio, and I have a lesson for the jaw as well, how to relax the jaw.
Excellent. I know you were ahead of your time in the sense that many years ago, as a participant of your classes, you were recording them then, so that your participants could practice throughout the week or listen to your recording. So I know you're way ahead of the curve of how helping people that are not actually in right in front of you. So
Right,
I
right.
congratulate you on that. But there's
Oh,
one
thank you.
last question. I'm sorry, I'm to digress back, but
Yeah.
when we were talking about this affinity that you have for breathing, you mentioned one thing that really I thought would be pertinent of discussing further here is about the position of your tongue related to posture. Do you think we have time for you to address that?
Absolutely. So if whoever's listening right now, if you sit on the edge of your chair, put your feet on the floor, kind of
Okay, I'm
sit
gonna
up
do
in
it.
the
I'm
chair,
gonna do it.
okay? And just let your tongue be wherever it is. You can drop your tongue actually, and then um, just notice your head position, your shoulder position, and then begin to let your tongue kind of come up and rest on the roof of your mouth, and not just the tip, but almost the whole tongue. I would say if you can sense the front 2/3 of your tongue, let it come up and sort of press it up the roof of your mouth. And just notice when you press up, what does that do to your head position? What does that do to your jaw position? How do you relate to your neck when you press your tongue up on the roof of your mouth?
I personally feel like I'm shifting
Shifting
it
back.
back. Yeah.
So you might, what it tends to do is um, it shifts the head up and sits so that the head sits better on top of the spine. And that's really important. Our head is heavy. And so when it's shifted forward, it tends to drop other things forward. Or if it's too far back, then it tends to cause a caving in at the neck or the chest. So where you put that bowling ball influences how your whole body will feel. But an interesting thing about the tongue, when you press it on the roof of your mouth, I guarantee that you will, if you need to go and pee and you're in a rush, you're not going to leak if you press your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Okay? So I know this is weird, but what it does, not only does it lift you here, but it influences the connective tissue in the body and it creates a little bit of a lift lower down. And so there's less pressure on the bladder. And so
Incredible.
I have a woman who I see, and she's in her early 70s, and she was complaining about having to wear a pad because, you know, she'd wait too long and then she'd leak when she was heading to the bathroom. And I was like, well, just press your tongue on the roof of your mouth. And she went, oh my God. And she says, I can get to, after I saw her, she said, I can get to the bathroom on time now. I don't have any issues with that.
So great. I love how the body is it's fascinating. Like
Yeah.
the intricacies that are happening that we're not even aware of. It's mind blowing once you kind of go down that rabbit hole and look at anatomy and physiologically what's happening. It's truly impressive. And I do want to thank you for this like sneak peek into what you do. I have a huge reverence for your wisdom and for your kindness and how you've helped so many people that I know of in the region, myself included. So I do want to take this time to, first of all, thank you for all that you do, and also celebrate you on this beautiful day of International Women's Day. Having a strong, independent, very nurturing, loving, caring woman here as my guest. So thanks so much, Fariya, for being here
Thank
today.
you.
And
Thank you so
yeah,
much.
maybe we'll explore in the future about some breathing stuff for anyone that's interested. And I will link everything below. And if you do have any questions for Fariya, feel free to drop them here. We'll make sure that she can address them, or you can just reach out to her directly. So thank you. And again, happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day. Thank you,
Thanks,
Sharlene.
Fariya.